Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted. And right now we've got a very high-powered Muldrotha the Gravetide deck from Andrew. Andrew says to the question of what needs improvement, explosive openers with no engines are the main issue. Not a problem getting the commander out, but usually nothing to do from there. And their restrictions are no restrictions. Anything in EDH, anything EDH legal is perfectly fine. So this will be an interesting look at a very high-powered deck. As always, the deck list will be in the video description below, and I highly recommend you go in and take a look at it. This is a really nice example of what happens when a deck reaches a certain kind of power level, and we're going to be left with a pretty big decision to make because of that power level. So let's take a look. First of all, as always, we'll have a brief moment to talk about Muldrotha. Who is Muldrotha? Muldrotha is a 6-mana Sultai elemental avatar with really nice art in this Double Masters full art. I think that's Double Masters, I could be wrong. But it says, let's just say they're also a 6/6, though that's not the reason you cast them. During each of your turns, you can play a land from your graveyard, and you can cast each card type once from your graveyard, which in this deck would be a creature, a sorcery, an instant. Actually, is it permanent type? Yeah, sorry. Each permanent type. So there'd be creature, enchantment, artifact, planeswalker. No battles in here, which I might take a peek in to see if there's any battles that are worth playing. So the idea of a Muldrotha deck is that you want to fill up your graveyard, and then you want to use Muldrotha to allow your graveyard to act like your hand, where you can cast things out of it. And it changes certain things up. For example, Spore Frog right over here is a creature that sacrifices itself to the graveyard, which means, in essence, with Muldrotha out, you can just loop it indefinitely as long as you don't want to cast a different creature out of your graveyard. Now, really quickly, let's look at the curve. Curve's looking really nice. There are 2 7s and 1 6, but those are our finishers. Toxrill and Coma are our 7s, and then our 6 is Muldrotha? Yeah, I guess Muldrotha. We don't usually count that. Yeah, just Muldrotha. Okay, well, there you go. Those are that's our curve, pretty nice. And before we go any further, we can see that there's a lot of power in this deck, right? At a glance, we're playing tutors such as Entomb. We aren't playing the vampiric tutor, but we are playing demonic tutor, diabolic intent, neoform, which is a form of a tutor. We are playing, very good counter spells as an offer you can't refuse. We're playing fierce guardianship. We're playing what I would consider a much higher level draw card package of Mystic Remora, Rhystic Study, Necropotence, and Sylvan Library, all of which together allow you to draw a ridiculous amount of cards at a higher cost. We've got really powerful planeswalkers in Oko and Ashiok, and we have cards such as Euro, Opposition Agent, like we're playing Lion's Eye Diamond. We have a lot of strength and power here. Now, we're reaching a kind of power level that we have to start asking ourselves questions. The first question when you reach a certain level of power level is, and sorry, I'm going to assume that the play group that Andrew is playing in has a similar level of power, right? That's what we have to assume when we have these decks. Unless someone says my deck is too strong and I need to power it down, we have to assume this is the correct power level here. So this leads me to have some questions, right? When someone's at this power level, when you need to play a card like Offer You Can't Refuse, what are the decks you're going up against? One can say Offer You Can't Refuse is particularly good at protecting your commander, let's say, for 1 mana. But I would argue that Offer You Can't Refuse isn't very good unless you're using it on the turn you're going to win, right? If you're going to play Thassa's Oracle with an empty library, Offer You Can't Refuse is really, really good so that your opponents can't take advantage of the massive bonus of having 2 extra mana on any of their turns coming up, right? The next time they want to cast something. And with that in mind, the first thing I notice is this deck is set up to be incredibly powerful, but it doesn't have a winning combo in it, right? We have a lot of means of getting ahead and blocking our opponents from doing anything meaningful to stop us. But what are we stopping? What are we stopping them from interrupting us from doing? That's a sentence. What do we want to do? The fact with the fact that we have such an ability to make sure we can do it. Judging by what Andrew wrote and looking at the deck, it's mainly to play Muldrotha. We want to be able to guarantee to play Muldrotha. And I get that, but Andrew's already found the problem here where just Muldrotha is not good enough. So let's go back, let's put the whole combo oriented idea to the side, and let's take a look at what we have here and what might be missing. Well, the thing I'm looking at is the second part of what happens when we increase the power level of our decks. We get a certain level where cards are being put into the deck for their power level and not their synergy with our commander. This is normal. For example, if you're in green, you're playing Eternal Witness, right? It's just a card that is generically good and fits in almost every deck. In fact, it almost fits in better with Muldrotha because you already have a graveyard strategy here. But let's keep looking on how many of these kind of cards there are, right? Once you start thinking of let's look away from the removal, let's look away from the tutors, then let's look away from all the draw, let's look away from things like Carpet of Flowers, the ramp, right? We're starting to realize we're getting to a space where there's not that many cards really that enable us to do the thing we actually want to do. So let's look at what we have. Aftershock mills 4 a turn. Hedron Crab can mill 3 per land or fetch land. Ghostly Pilfer is a discard outlet. Let's see. That's pretty much it for creatures. Hermit Druid, sorry. Hermit Druid bears its own kind of conversation a little later, but it's very strong. Let's see. Windfall is technically, I don't know, I'm always a little hesitant to call wheels necessarily um, ways to put cards in the graveyard because they also are kind of interaction. When you know your opponent has been sculpting a hand, wheeling can be an incredibly powerful spell at this level of play. We come down here. Intuition technically puts 2 cards in your graveyard, which is exactly what you want, but can be unwieldy, so I'm not necessarily going to count that in there. Lion's Eye Diamond is a discard outlet, albeit a bit of a strange one. Altar of Dementia is an enabler. And then finally here we've got Court of Cunning, which can mill 10, maybe. Most likely is 3 mana to mill 2 each turn, which is a little less nice. And that's kind of it, right? Unless I'm missing something particularly strong in our land slots, which I don't think I am, because most of these are mana lands and very few utility. I think it's pretty easy to see that one of the problems, Survival of the Fittest kind of does this, but we'll come back to that. One of the problems is that we're missing a lot of cards to enable Muldrotha. We have a few very, very strong enablers, like Hermit Druid is fantastic because you have 3 basics, therefore you mill the majority of your deck. But Hermit Druid is one of those really risky creatures because your opponents will kill him on sight, and he needs to not have summoning sickness. Where something like Hedron Crab is also good here because with a high amount of fetches, amongst other things, you can, oh, there we go. You can almost guarantee that you're milling quite a few there. Altar of Dementia also is kind of cool because you can loop certain creatures, but even then, how much are you milling? Probably not that much. We're missing kind of a guaranteed mill, and we're missing the means to guarantee certain hits into the graveyard, right? We have Entomb, and Entomb only. So Buried Alive feels like a very, very natural fit here. Search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them in your graveyard. and then shuffle your library. This is 3 cards. These are 3 creatures. You can put Hermit Druid, Hedron Crab, and then let's say something like, I don't know, even Gilded Drake would be fine there. Any combination of these cards, any of the ones that you need the most. Euro is free to put in there because you can just cast it from the graveyard itself. That's fantastic. I think Buried Alive would give you just another option. And I wouldn't even change that much more because I think the deck is strong enough, and I think you should be mulliganing into having at least one enabler. And then if that gets kind of stopped, yeah, you're in trouble, but the deck itself is going to be in that situation. So let's talk about cuts and changes. So something I've been kind of dancing around when we power up a deck like this is that Muldrotha becomes less and less necessary the stronger the deck becomes, right? So as you strengthen the deck, you have to be aware that you are kind of robbing your commander from doing its thing, and that's why it feels kind of weird to ramp into Muldrotha and have nothing to do, because your hand is filled with things like Psych Rift, Rhystic Study, you know, you've just used a bunch of mana rocks, you're holding up Orcish Bowmasters. Like these are really cool, strong cards, but they don't really have anything to do with your commander. So, with that in mind, let's step into the more powerful side. One of the things that you could do is just straight up play Thassa's Oracle. And I think the combination card with Thassa's Oracle is Demonic Consultation. These 2 cards, for those who aren't CEDH knowledgeable, Demonic Consultation lets you exile your entire deck, and Thassa's Oracle says that if your deck is empty, you win the game. It's a 2-card combo in blue and black that you see often in CEDH. Here, it fits in really, really nicely. I see no downside to running this card here. Everything I see is that this is an appropriate power level for Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation combo. However, once you put those cards in, this deck fundamentally changes. This deck becomes more than almost CDH. I would say it is CDH at that point, and it is no longer a Muldrotha deck. It is a Demonic Consultation Thassa's Oracle deck. Muldrotha will be in your command zone much more often, and you're only going to cast Muldrotha when you're behind, so that you can recoup, your resources that have gone to the graveyard. Now, for some people, that's unattractive, and I get why. You're playing Commander. One of the primary things you want to do is cast your commander. And for a lot of people, the main game plan is to cast their commander as soon as possible and reap the rewards of that commander. I get that. Even a lot of my commander decks play that way, even at higher power levels. As I often talk about my Brina deck, Brina is a very powerful commander that has a lot of utility, and I play it with infinite combos to get ahead. But at the same time, I still want to play Brina as early as possible and reap the rewards of doing so. Muldrotha may not work that way. So some people will be okay with that. Some people will see Muldrotha as, I guess, a companion more than a commander, if that makes sense. Where this is a card that you have in your back pocket. You start the game with an additional card in hand for the whole game, and later in the game, playing out Muldrotha is going to be incredibly powerful. But you'll have to be fine with games that you just don't play out Muldrotha because there's no benefit to doing so. So that's something to think about. If you are ready to if you're ready to power the deck up even further to get it to the level that I believe your deck seems to imply it's at, that's probably the biggest change you're going to have to make. That will guarantee your deck goes from doing nothing to doing something every game. All those tutors that would get you, a little bit of advantage or enabler can also be used to get your quote unquote I win combo. And I think that's really worth considering. Okay, let's talk a little bit about cuts, because after saying all that, one of the things to take away is you might not necessarily want to do that. Like, you might not want to just go into Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation, and which is fair, which might need you to adjust the deck a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer what I think general cuts are, or general like points of criticism that hopefully can help you, regardless of whether or not you're going to power down the deck or power up the deck. And there's a few that stand out to me as being a little strange than others. Massacre Girl seems a bit strange. Massacre Girl is a really cool card. I'm very happy they printed her into a card, but I kind of liked her more when she was just flavor text. Uh, I don't know why. That's just me. But Massacre Girl basically does. I think it was Defile from Hearthstone. It gives -1/-1 to everything, and then if something dies, it happens again. Now, this is cool, but I think at least Massacre Girl doesn't get the -1/-1s herself, but it's also unwieldy. Like some boards, you are going to just wipe it with Massacre Girl, and it's going to be really, really cool. And other boards, not so much. This is 5 mana for sometimes a board clear that still affects the rest of your cards. I recognize that she's in here because she's a permanent, but you're probably just better up. Wait, are you already playing Toxic Deluge? You should be. Yeah, okay. I mean, if you want the effect, then probably just Damnation. I know it's not ideal, but it's just going to be more regular. Master Girl is just going to kind of rot in your hand sometimes as a 5 mana spell that sometimes doesn't do anything. Well, I would argue more than sometimes. I would say often doesn't do what you want it to do. And a 4/4 menace isn't really a body that's worth keeping. Uh, Phasing of Zarfir, I immediately remember because I said, why not play Damnation? Phasing of Zarfir, why not play Damnation? I guess is something that comes to mind. I get once again, it's a permanent. It is a recurable board wipe over and over. But at this power level, do you need to wipe the board every few turns? Probably not, I would assume, but I don't know that for sure. It's cute with Muldrotha, and it's not so cute without Muldrotha. Like, you could put it on two because of read ahead, phase out Muldrotha, and then on your next turn you have a board clear. But that's not particularly strong. You're at a power level. You're playing, an offer you can't refuse, and Carpet of Flowers. Your opponents now can play around a board clear. They can bounce it. They can just not play creatures. They're not going to particularly mind. You've basically told them, you know, what your plan is. I don't think it's going to be particularly strong here. Um, it's going to be cute, and I like cute, but at this level, you can't have as many cute cards as before. Let's see, there's a few others. Fleshbag Marauder exists in a kind of weird space that I both think it's good, but I mean the direct. I think what you should be doing is if you're playing that, you should be playing Platecrafter. Platecrafter is the superior version of this type of creature, where it hits creatures or planeswalkers and the players who can't discard a card. So if you're gonna play Fleshback Marauder, you should be playing Platecrafter. And even then, I'm kind of iffy on whether you should be playing Platecrafter. It is once again, it is going to be really, really dependent on what is on the board, whether it's going to be good or useless. I've talked about this in other aristocrat decks that I have assisted, but Plaguecrafter effects or Innocent Blood effects get better when you have a critical mass of them. When you can do them repeatedly turn after turn, they get really, really good. Now, you might be saying, Cursed Deck Builder, I can do this turn after turn with Muldrotha, but you got to have Muldrotha out. And at that point in the game, like I guess starting turn, you can get your Christmas land and get Muldrotha out the second turn, and then turn 3 going forward, you're just playing, Plague Crafter turn after turn. Compared to the other things this deck can do, that feels a little underpowered, right? I'd rather you be constantly cast. I want you to cast like two or three different spells a turn, and you have better creatures that I think you'd be getting out from your graveyard if that option is around, such as opposition agents, such as Euro, etc., etc. So, though I'm not going to say cut play crafter, I would say think about it. It's kind of close there. Displacer Kitten feels weird. I feel like I'm missing something because I also see it. I guess the reason is that it flickers Muldrotha because I saw other people playing it, and I guess when you flicker Muldrotha, you reset Muldrotha and you get to do it again. And therefore not only is it, and it's also like protection and you can buy back a few cards with it. Okay, maybe I'm medium on this card. I think what it does in a deck like this than feels weaker than it should be. Like the dream is that you have cards like Ewit, Orcish Bowmasters, Gilded Drake, cards like this that have really good ETBs, or you want them on your side of the board, or Euro, and every time you cast another spell, you get another use out of them. But you don't have that many instants, and you don't even have that many sorceries, so you're triggering them off of like enchantments, artifacts more often, which once again is fine because you can cast those from the graveyard. I don't know. I'm gonna withhold judgment here because it sticks out to me as a kind of a weird inclusion in a deck like this, but it could be really strong and I don't know it. Shriekmaw, I don't know if you want terror that badly. Like, yeah, you can repeatedly cast terror each turn if it's the only creature you want to cast, but is that really that strong to be able to destroy a non-black, non-artifact creature every turn? I guess. I guess. Okay. Maybe so. Maybe I'll leave that one as well. Toxrill and Coma seem to be your win conditions. I think they're fine. I think Coma is a lot more attractive because Toxrill is pretty easy to interact with, whereas Coma at least can have indestructible and can't be countered. Toxrill is, I guess, one of the ideas is, well, you're already at 7 mana, so if Toxrill dies, you know, it doesn't matter because you're going to be able to cast it again. And I think that's the same idea with Coma, except for at least Coma has indestructible. I wish it could have Shroud because I think Swords to Plowshares is the scarier thing for both of these. And I would suggest that if you are considering Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, you could take both of these out. They're cool, but they're probably not what's going to win you a game anyways. If you're turning creatures sideways, you have Muldrotha. But more often than not, I don't think you're attacking your opponents to win anyways. So you could cut one and keep the other, I think. And I'm leaning towards Coma more than Toxrill. Otherwise, the only other thing that kind of sticks out at me, I think, is Pernicious Deed. Yeah. Pernicious Deed, I understand once again we've got this situation where it can be cast from your graveyard to be like a repeatable engineered explosive effect. And though that's not bad, that's really, really clunky, almost to the point that I don't know if I'd rather just an ETB creature that destroys a permanent. Though not exactly that. I'm thinking of slime, acidic slime. Though that's not exactly that. I think of it in the sense that I'm looking at Pernicious Deed. I think Pernicious Deed is really, really strong at lower power levels, where you know, cards pull up on the battlefield and your opponents don't really interact with each other, and therefore you get ahead by being able to wipe the board really, really efficiently. But at higher power levels, I find most players don't have many permanents, and they interact with each other enough that the cards don't pool up in that way, right? Like if someone plays Thalia, Guardian of Thraben in this power level, your opponents will have to deal with it quickly, especially if they're, permission decks or they want to cast 3 or 4 spells a turn. These kind of cards have to be taken off the battlefield. And so Pernicious Deed gets worse and worse because cards kept getting, they keep getting destroyed, bounced, exiled, and every time you cast Pernicious Deed, you're gonna have to kind of suss out what the best cast is because you're basically you should be considering this at least a 5 mana spell with the caveat that you have to hold up mana, right? Because one of the things that makes this card good is that it doesn't have to be used on your turn, which also means you have to hold up the mana because the threat has to be there. Otherwise, your opponents are mainly going to ignore this or just remove it. There's a lot of like very easy exile effects to get rid of this card permanently, and I think it's a bit tricky to use. I feel like with a deck that has so much power that's generically good, having something like Pernicious Deed that requires you to jump through so many hoops in order to get the advantage feels a bit weird. The land base looks great. I think this is solid, and the rest of the deck is very, very good. Okay, so those are the things that I feel like that stick out a little bit. I'm going to reiterate my point because I feel like I've said it a few times, but I just want to conclude on it. Right now, you are at a crossroads of a deck at this power level. If the power level grows, Muldrotha will no longer be a commander per se and more of a companion. A card that you'll probably have to cast just to resupply your hand and get some board presence again or start building towards your combo again. That is, unfortunately, it's just the case of a deck of that power level that has a 6 mana commander. There's just only so much you can do with those kind of numbers. Alternatively, if you were interested in powering down the deck a little bit by not playing Thassa's Oracle, then you should probably invest in getting a few more cards that enable Muldrotha primarily. Uh, you wouldn't need too many, like I said, Buried Alive and a few others. And then you would have to play the game in a way, and I'm talking specifically about mulliganing, to ensure that not to sorry, let me rephrase this. Instead of trying to guarantee an early Muldrotha, you need to guarantee an early card like a graveyard engine. This is kind of what you said, where let me go back to what you messaged me. You said that explosive openers with no engines are the main issue. I think that kind of answers the question, right? The problem is not the problem is kind of self-made. If you have a hand where you have an explosive opener and nothing to do with it, well, don't keep that hand, right? A 6/6 Muldrotha is not very good. And yeah, there's cute things you can do, like for example, playing Muldrotha and any extra mana you might have off of things like Lion's Eye Diamond and the like, and Jeweled Lotus. Well, Jeweled Lotus having to paying, so you can do other things, allows you to then play Jeweled Lotus from your graveyard immediately, right? Or play Lion's Eye Diamond from your graveyard immediately. And then one of the cards you discarded from Lion's Eye Diamond could be like Carpet of Flowers, which you can then cast, or something along those lines, right? And that's pretty good. You should be, those kind of things can get you ahead, but probably not that far ahead, right? Having Carpet of Flowers and Muldrotha in play with the ability to recur Lion's Eye Diamond a lot, yeah, that's cool, but it's not really getting you anywhere. You've got a ton of mana in a Muldrotha, and you shouldn't keep that hand. That hand is unfortunately unkeepable in a deck like this. So I would say, apart from the changes I have suggested and the conversation you need to have with yourself about whether or not you want to power up Muldrotha or keep it kind of power it down a little bit, you should be a little critical of the hands you keep and try to keep track of the games you play where you feel like you've gotten very far ahead and see what kind of hands you kept and see what kind of play patterns enabled that. Therefore, you can get the deck working the way you want. I hope this deck assist was helpful to you. This was a little more about deck ideas and more than individual cards in the deck. Still, I hope it was helpful. And if you have a next draft of this deck, I'd love to see it. I think the deck is very close to being completed. It has a few cards that feel kind of weird, and beyond that, once the deck kind of decides where it wants to be in power level, it'll mostly be complete, and I would be really happy to have that. And I'm planning to create a database of quote unquote completed decks. So I would love to have it for that. Or if you have any other decks you'd like me to take a look at, there is a form in the video description where you can put all that information in and send it my way. In addition, as always, if you like to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube thing, I would be very, very grateful. The channel is growing, and any support is incredibly helpful. All right. I really like this art, if nothing else. If you take nothing else away from this video, is play this art. This is about $7. Play this art. It's so beautiful. All right. Good luck.